They said the list decides who belongs. That morning, my name was missing, and so was their respect. Flags along the fence snapped, each one cracking like a reprimand. Brass warm-ups leaked from inside the bass fragments of the anthem half-formed. I stood at the Norfolk gate in dress blues shoes, polished to glass invitation pinched between my fingers. The paper bent slightly at the corner, softened by worry I would not name. 00, June 10, 2023. Guests advanced in murmurs. Their names glowed green on the guard's tablet, each approval, another small erasure. He hardly looked at me. The stylus flicked, paused, scrolled. Not on the list, ma'am. Run it again, I said. He did. The line slid past men who never saw a night op, women who never wrote a casualty letter. Their presence was confirmed in bright green. My turn came. His eyes stayed flat. Not on the list. The words were precise, practiced the clean drop of a gavel. A stamp where my identity should have been. Through the bars, I saw the echo of my life granted to someone else, banners stitched in gold thread uniforms gleaming, a photographer testing flash against metals. Silence had always shielded me, but silence could also erase you. A sedan pulled up. Michael stepped out as if the air itself parted for him. Applause broke without command. Sunlight clung to his collar and jaw. He shook hands like father taught, fast, firm, claiming. When his gaze caught mine, he slowed just enough to smirk. Guess paperwork says it all. He didn't stop. Edward and Helen glided behind him as if tethered by orbit. Mother's pearls winked like constellations. Father's eyes cut across me without pause, as if I were already gone. The guard cleared his throat, flustered. Maybe some printing error, ma'am. Understood. I placed the invitation on his desk, token of a world that trusts lists over truth. Inside, the march began. Drums rolled heavy, beating the pavement until I felt it through my bones. The anthem swelled proud and merciless, and the gate arms descended. Shadow climbed my shoes, traced my uniform, marking time like a sundial of absence. Memory cut through the debrief where a colonel thanked the right people while my name sat sealed. The message at 2 a.m. that dragged me into a room without windows. The carrier turn I ordered in the dark, saving lives no one applauded. Silence was survival, but survival in silence becomes a weapon for others. The anthem peaked. Michael's silhouette filled the podium, washed in gold and brass. My parents stood sharpened by pride, arranged around him like laurel leaves carved in stone. The gate shut with a final hiss, rubber kissing asphalt. Beyond, clapping rose and fell like surf. The world applauded, and I stood outside the tide. If they won't write my name, I'll carve it myself. Inside those walls, they toasted his future. Outside, I swallowed the weight of being forgotten. By 10 o'clock, the reception hall glowed, chandelier light scattering across brass and glass. I stayed to the perimeter, circling portraits and long tables where officers and journalists clustered. Laughter rose in neat waves, obedient to the man commanding the room, Michael. He stood beneath the biggest chandelier, ringed by cameras, and the approving tilt of our parents' heads. Father's stance was parade ground perfect. Mother's pearls caught the light. I watched while Michael accepted handshakes like tribute. He belonged. I did not. I edged toward a velvet rope, unnecessary, symbolic, when a young officer stepped across my path. His face had the calm of someone trained to say no, only recognized family inside. The words struck like stone. I stepped back. The rope brushed my sleeve. Rules erase people. A spoon struck crystal. Michael lifted a flute. Legacy means being remembered, and some of us just fade away. Laughter spread, agreeable, easy, cruel. Our parents clapped as if exclusion were part of the program. Heat rose under my collar. I had stood in rooms that congratulated the wrong names. Public contempt tightened something behind my ribs. I turned before my face betrayed more than the room deserved. As I shifted, a lieutenant altered course toward a tray of glasses. She never looked at me. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. A folded scrap slid into my palm. In the pillar's shadow, I opened it. Black ink, steady hand, files Michael can't erase. Ask me later. Across the room, Rachel Monroe, aligned plates, making her pass look like housekeeping. When our eyes met for a breath, she didn't smile. She held the look the way a person holds a door when they mean it. Reporters pressed in. An admiral murmured to Michael. His grin widened. I trained myself to let that barbed sound pass, choosing where to bleed. I returned to the rope, not expecting it to move. To remind my spine it had purpose. The officer who'd stopped me shifted, uncertain now that I had nowhere to go. He studied my pockets as if a patch might conjure a place. I looked past him to the stage where legacy was poured into glasses. I read the note again. Files. Michael can't erase. Not a promise. A beginning of fact. Facts can be stacked into ladders. Across the hall, Mother's hand found Father's sleeve. The pose hardened. Memory answered ledger entries carrying other signatures on work I guided. Windowless rooms where names vanished. A ship's pivot in black water that kept a formation alive. I let those moments condense into weight. Ms. Hale. A journalist edged close, then corrected himself with a quick smile. Pardon, ma'am. Any comment on your brother's elevation? Enjoy the champagne, I said, turning so the question slid away. Behind him, Rachel aligned glasses, opportunity disguised as service. She didn't look back. The message in my hand hummed like a live wire. The spoon kissed crystal again. Michael finished with safe words and weightless gratitude. The crowd lifted glasses on cue. I gripped the note until it warmed. The applause sounded like rain on a metal roof, hard, close, unable to touch what lay beneath. The officer at the rope studied the floor, embarrassed by a rule he'd been proud to enforce. If the gate is closed, I'll find another way in. I slipped the paper into my jacket lining and let my palm rest. Fuel needs a tank. It needs a path to the engine. The band tested a march. Somewhere a door opened and salt air cut the perfume. I breathed once, slow, until my hands steadied. Then I looked at the rope and the faces beyond and saw a map instead of a wall. They thought silence meant surrender. That night I carried silence like a weapon. At 1 p.m, the base felt different. Morning pageantry folded. Reception noise dulled behind concrete. The storage wing hushed. Fluorescents hummed. Gray cabinets stood in formation, drawers labeled and locked, obedient to steel. Rachel Monroe waited where corridor met corridor, a camera's blind angle. Her jaw worked once tension ground to resolve. No chatter, she said without moving her lips. 2 doors, then the records room. Badge in. 30 seconds on the lock before it tattles. We walked like a shadow split in two. The first door yielded to her card. The second required a pause. Air inside held paper and cold dust. I closed the door. Silence settled. Rachel keyed a sequence from muscle memory. Logs are mirrored, she whispered. He edited the visible copies. He couldn't touch the backups. From her pocket, a small black shape. Take this. The USB sat on her palm like a negative of light. I felt its weight before I touched it, the gravity of names, stamps, signatures denied daylight. I slid it into the inner pocket of my blouse. My heartbeat found it and knocked a metronome in a small room. I pulled the ops you led that were credited to him, Rachel said. Routing, audit trails. Not pretty, but solid. Her eyes cut to the door. Security walks at 13 past. We have 7 minutes. We searched by feel as much as sight. Drawers opened with sullen sighs. I skimmed headers for codes threading months of unmarked labor. Here was the briefing before the carrier pivot. Here the after-action remarks Michael had signed as if my judgment were a mirror he owned. Rachel printed 2 pages mine and his stamped the same minute. He lifted whole paragraphs, she murmured. Changed proper nouns and kept your verbs? It's the verbs that matter, I said. Footsteps brushed the corridor, not close yet. The lights stuttered. I pressed the USB deeper, letting the body become vault and proof. We backed toward the door. In the glass slit, a figure took the T of the hallway. Michael. He stopped, looked. Left, then right, a predator in passing. His shoulders carried the morning's applause as residue. Instinct tugged my heel. I stepped into the hinge-made triangle of shadow. Rachel's breath shortened. He can't see us if he doesn't already expect us, she mouthed. Tomorrow he won't own my silence, he'll fear it. The words left on a thread, a promise the room kept. Seconds stretched. A clipboard slapped. A cartwheel squeaked, then quieted. Michael drifted closer, eyes skimming numbers on doors he'd never learned. Suspicion makes students of the arrogant. He paused at the archive threshold and lifted his chin, listening as if the building might pick a side. I rehearsed stillness. The USB pulsed under my hand. I thought of the gate lowering laughter tuned to his breath, legacy turned weapon. This would be the counterstroke, no flourish, no speech, just evidence at the speed of consequence. Rachel shifted half an inch. The lock's LED blinked green. We had time, not excess courage. Plan exit when the corridor gave us noise. Melt into logistics. Become 2 uniforms, moving boxes that weren't boxes. An intercom crackled a summons down the hall. Michael turned to follow it, then stopped, a dog catching a new scent. His shadow reached the glass and was cut by the frame. I let breath out slowly, an agreement with the room. One step, then another, the kind you take when the branch under your boot might choose to betray you. Rachel eased the latch, quiet as an apology. We didn't leave. We prepared for the moment. Leaving meant winning. Michael pauses, staring toward the archive door, muttering, "What are you doing here, Katie? If the hush before the strike held you, stay with me for the next reveal. Subscribe now." So you're there the moment the silence cracks wide open. They gave him the stage. I gave him the truth. At 1900 on June 10, 2023, the ceremonial hall at Norfolk glowed like a promise. Admiral Reynolds stood center, coat sharp as a verdict, the seal behind him heavy. Michael entered first, waving as if the air existed to lift him. Our parents rose, pride setting their faces in marble. Rachel Monroe had taken a seat in the gallery, expression unreadable, hands folded in restraint. Reynolds opened the folder. For acts of valor? The phrase drew every head. Michael straightened, chin ready for laurel. Recognition goes to the room, held its breath. Admiral Katherine Hale. Gasps snapped off. I rose without haste, letting the surprise age a second so it would hold. Michael turned so sharply his ribbons flashed. "That's my record," he barked, voice cracking. He moved a half step as if proximity could reclaim truth. Reynolds did not flinch. He lifted a printout and the small black drive. "Reports authored by Admiral Hale," he said, voice even, subsequently repackaged under Commander Michael Hale. Screens filled with side-by-side pages, my original briefings, his copies, timestamps conjoined like twins who could not deny their blood. Flashes popped and faltered. Even cameras lowered an eye. Michael threw both hands up, palms cutting air. "You're making a mistake. I led those ops, ask anyone." His words stumbled. "This is a setup." My mother's hand clutched my father's sleeve. He stood stiffer, a man resisting gravity. I walked the aisle, heel on wood, steady as a clock. At the foot of the stage, I saluted. I didn't look at Michael. I didn't look at my parents. I gave the room what it had not given me, restraint. Reynolds returned the salute, then turned the printouts outward. The side screens magnified signatures, routing slips. The audit trail, the dull, luminous shape of evidence. The record speaks for itself. The stage lights washed the blue and gold into one hard color. Reporters leaned forward, pens stilled, as if sound itself went formal. Somewhere a child stopped fidgeting. Silence spread thick, immediate. It moved through rows into lights and rafters. It had weight and settled on Michael first. He made a sound that began like a laugh and ended like a cough. Those are drafts he tried, but the word drafts could not survive the timestamps. A journalist whispered, "Oh," as if translating at last. Reynolds gestured to the master-at-arms procedure, not spectacle. I could feel, rather than hear, my mother's breath hitch. My father stared forward, naval discipline furnishing no script. The cameras resumed lower, each click reluctant, like photographing the sea after learning what it hides. I stepped onto the stage. The lights found the bars on my collar and the marks time leaves where rank cannot reach. I faced the hall without words, letting the ledger do what applause never did, name the work. Rachel stood now, but only to make space for others to see. She was the hinge. The door swung because of her quiet hand. Michael tried a final pivot. "If she wrote them," he said, "why keep quiet?" His tone implied cowardice. The room recognized protocol instead. I met Reynolds's eye, then Michael's shoulder, not his face. Because operations aren't parades. No flourish, no list. Only the thing itself in the open. "This ceremony will proceed," he said. "Corrections have been entered." Corrections carried a clean, merciless mercy. Front row officers sat back as if a wind had passed. Somewhere a flag lifted, then fell. The narrative had been a closed-circuit power moving only where expected. Now the circuit broke the room, adjusting to a new current. I breathed once, measured, and let the silence gather. It gathered me back. For the first time, silence was mine to command. They once told me silence would erase me. Instead, it carved my name where their applause used to be. Morning bled into Arlington like light through marble. Dew clung to the grass. I walked the rise between rows of white, the names standing at attention in silence. At a sailor's stone, one I'd written for and could never write again, I set a single white rose. My glove touched the cool edge. "We are not erased," I whispered. Families moved past. Officers paused, salutes crisp, and for the first time no one looked away. Rachel stood back beneath a sycamore, neither guarding nor intruding. When our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod, a hinge in an old door. I returned it. She had carried a match into a dark room and left me to choose where to strike. Edward and Helen passed at a distance, gazes fixed on a horizon that refused to look back. Pride is a uniform too. It fits poorly when truth alters the cut. By afternoon, the Pentagon press room pulsed with wattage. Reporters rehearsed questions about investigations, about Michael, about legacy. His name rode the room in whispers, disgraced inquiry, pending proof that absence can be a verdict. I stood behind the curtain uniform, exact medals lit without flourish. A staffer lifted a finger. The podium was smaller than the silence I brought. I set my hands on its edges as the room inhaled. Cameras rose, then wavered. I began to speak and didn't. Instead, I offered the one thing they had taught me to use, and then misread, in me quiet. It spread across the tiers, cooling microphones and pens. A murmur tried to stand and thought better of it. In the back row, a young officer's shoulders squared. In the front, an old one blinked, as if the shape of grief had changed. I raised my hand in salute. No words. Only the posture that belongs to the living and the lost alike. For 5 beats the room obeyed. Hands rose in uneven unison and found the stillness. News became witness, the cameras lowered as if a lens understood that sometimes truth refuses grammar. The hush held. It was not empty. It was full. When I dropped my hand, sound returned softly like settlers to ground already named. Questions reshaped themselves into thanks. Rachel's face near the press line eased, proud, unclaimed. This was never about vengeance. It was about the ledger making absence visible and returning stolen verbs. The morning's rose would wilt by evening, but what it marked would not. Michael did not own the stage. He wasn't even in the building. They had told me silence would erase me. It didn't. It lifted the letters and left them where anyone could read. They once locked me outside the gate. Now silence itself opens every door. Stand with me now. If my silence spoke to you, lend it your voice, share, comment, and tell me where you've faced closed gates. Your words strengthen this fight for credit, truth, and dignity. I've learned to gather evidence, breathe before reacting, and let restraint carry further than rage. Audit the stories others tell about you. Document your work. Choose allies who act quietly but decisively. When doors refuse to open, carve your name and walk through. I'll keep leading with honor.